Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 84? 84?
84.
84 of the Clutch Dump. I'm eating a Triscuit.
20 years of trying, 20 years.
And Senna sprints away. Banana.
Rossi's right in behind Lorenzo.
The 101st Indianapolis 500 is won by Takuma Sato. Dale Earnhardt will come to the caution flag to win the Daytona 500.
Make sure to follow us right here on YouTube at the Clutch Dump Pod. Like the video, like the episode, subscribe, leave a comment, because we're going to be talking about some interesting motorsport stuff today, because there was a lot of tea. On top of that, Ben was at the USGP, well, the sprint.
Well, I was
And
like
we
half
have
of it,
a new MotoGP winner, who is someone that, referred back to a few episodes ago, I actually thought had won GPs. So I guess now I'm right. I was actually foreshadowing. That's what that was.
True.
And much, much more. So I'm joined by Ben Walter.
Hi.
Let's get right into it. Ben, what would you like to start with?
Oh, well, Nick, we have quite a bit of news tidbits, so I figured we could run through some of those first. And starting with something I'm quite excited about, and that is the 2024 calendar for the World Rally Championship. Now, if you don't follow the World Rally Championship, this won't mean anything to you. However, I have compared it to this year's championship. It is the exact same length of rallies. We still have 13 rallies. The majority of them are the same. So we start with Rally Monte Carlo and then move to Rally Sweden. That is unchanged from this year. But then we go to the Safari Rally Kenya. That has changed. That is normally the 7th rally on the calendar. It is now the 3rd. We then go to the Croatia Rally, Rally de Portugal, Rally Italia Sardinia, which is the 6th rally. And then we go to 2 rallies that are both new for the calendar. We go to Rally Poland for round 7, and then we go to Rally Latvia for round 8, followed by the way, the rest of these are the same from this year: Rally Finland, Acropolis Rally Greece, Rally Chile, and then Central European Rally ended off with Rally Japan. As always, so that's the new calendar for next year. It kicks off at the same time, but should make for an interesting series. An interesting season. I'm quite interested to see how Rally Poland and Rally Latvia go. Kenya isn't new. Cool. They just switched what end of the calendar it's on. But yeah, that should be a good time. Motorcycle news, which I actually didn't put in there, Nick put in there. Which I'm quite surprised about, even though I've actually been talking to people about it all day.
What can I say? The magic of Twitter.
Nick is on top of it. Ducati is joining motocross, which is super cool, but probably not as crazy as you think. So Aprilia used to have a very strong motocross presence, and another company who is joining motocross for next year is Triumph. So Triumph is actually launching a giant motocross thing. Their lead sponsor is Monster Energy. The main Monster Energy team is now Triumph, no longer Kawasaki, which is a crazy move in the motocross world. So should be exciting to see Ducati motocross bikes and Triumph motocross bikes as well. It appears that Ducati wasn't beating up on the Japanese manufacturers enough in MotoGP, so they had to take it to the dirt. I think
Before you ask, no, we're not going to cover motocross every week. Sorry, just not happening.
No, I will occasionally touch on it if the bikes do well, but it's motocross. It's kind of a spec series, and then it's just down to the rider at that point. I know it's not exactly a spec series, but much more so than MotoGP is. So,
guys, he's wearing a Logan Sargent hat. He's kind of new to this whole racing thing.
Sorry, I'm getting used to it. But yeah, I think that should be super interesting. I think as far as marketing-wise, it's a great move for Ducati. Motocross is still, I think it's actually more popular than MotoGP. Like, the main series gets more views than MotoGP. So from a marketing standpoint, it makes sense. Plus, adventure bikes is kind of the hottest kind of subject of motorcycles at the moment. Genre of motorcycles is what I was looking for. So from a marketing standpoint, it makes sense. They're trying to sell more Multistradas and Desert X's. Plus, they're trying to appeal to a younger audience. So dirt bikes are in. Go race motocross. So should be interesting to see how Ducati does there. Dick Patty, would you like to comment on some IndyCar news?
Yes, ladies and gentlemen. Pietro Fittipaldi, who you may know is a Haas reserve driver in Formula One, takes over a full-time seat for Rahal Letterman landing in racing in the number 30 IndyCar for the 2024 series. A little bit of random trivia I did not know, but Max Pappas is apparently Pietro Fittipaldi's uncle, but he will remain as the IndyCar race steward. But in incidents where Pietro is involved, he's basically going to recuse himself. They'll have like a reserve or a guest race steward who will...
basically he'll step out of incidents to eliminate any bias there.
Exactly. So that is coming your way in IndyCar. Super cool. I'm excited for him. I saw somebody that said, oh, this is a shame because we're not going to get to see your talents in hypercar. And I was sitting there, I was like, bruh.
I feel like IndyCar and hypercar are at least of similar, I think
IndyCar has much more prestige on an international
IndyCar for sure has much more prestige, but as far as being a top level of racing, hypercars is the top level of sports cars.
Yeah, well, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, I like hypercar more. But guys, he has a shot to win the Indy 500 now, or he can win the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Both massive races. Indy 500 is bigger. Sorry.
True.
Also, if he wants to be into Formula One adjacent, that's the seat to be in. So anyway.
True. Well, speaking of Formula One and IndyCar adjacent, we have some more news on the Andretti Global situation. Andretti Global is already testing their own 2023 Formula One car, soon to begin testing on a 2025 prototype. Now, as we mentioned in the previous episode, it would have been like episode 80 or 79 or something like that. Andretti Global did get approval from the FIA to become a Formula One team.
Now,
however, they are not a Formula One team.
But did you see? Sorry, my dogs are on some different stuff right now. So apparently, the F1 teams in Liberty approached GM. The FOM did.
Yes.
And they basically said, GM, is there any other team you would partner with other than Andretti? Which, I'm in a whole nother Twitter spat with people because I'm like, this just proves that it was a personal thing against Michael Andretti.
Yeah,
which
that's all it is.
Is ironic because Logie Sarge scored points for the first time since Michael Andretti in F1 for an American. So I just think that's ironic, but on top of it all, it proves that it's personal. And additionally, I was sitting there and my tweet was, I don't like Toto Wolff. We should just kick him to the curb because after all, we should just be able to pick and choose. I don't think Haas adds any value to the sport. Let's just chuck him to the side. I was like, no. The whole point of sport, not even motorsports, sport, is to have the best of the best in their respective disciplines compete against.
Also,
if GM as a manufacturer wants to enter, and you have a team that has international recognition across open wheel, sports car, etc., and they want to compete, no one should be getting in the way of that. I don't even care. Also, notice how their original concern was, market and revenue and splits. And now it's just, can it be anybody but they don't even have a problem with an 11 team. They're just like, we just don't like Michael. Can it be anybody else? No. Get over yourselves.
I think the problem is that they're genuinely concerned that Andretti will do well.
Yeah.
Because they're coming in with a ton of racing heritage, a ton of open wheel knowledge, plus money from General Motors.
GM will what's happening is F1 is having PTSD of the Gurney Eagle. They're like, no, they can't, no.
Pretty much.
And they're sitting there thinking, man, we got lucky with Haas sucking. Let's not let another American team in where they might do well.
So Andretti has yet to meet approval from the FOM, like we just said, Liberty Media, for their entry into F1. They have to run a cost-benefits analysis, pretty much. They have to do the maths and see if it makes sense from a marketing and business standpoint to bring Andretti in. And Michael Andretti was quoted as saying, well, at the moment, we are still shooting for 2025. He later said maybe 2026. Our car is actually going to be in the wind tunnel next week. That would be this week. So we have a car already built up in 23 spec. So despite the fact that they're not a team yet, they're already developing a Formula One car. So they are very committed to it, and they are getting a 2-year head start on it. Which is pretty good considering most other teams aren't. I think probably the only other one that is Sauber.
Hear me out. Ford, Red Bull, right? They have their little, Red Bull, you're winning all the time. How about we rebrand some of them as Ford engines? Come on, let's make it work.
Batteries.
Andretti is going to come
Ford
stomping in 2025, slap a Chevy label up on the frickin' airbox.
Cadillac logo.
I know. I'm just saying Chevy because as of now, it's neither. So I can make it whatever I want. That's the great.
Oh, is it not officially Cadillac? Because it was supposed to be Andretti Cadillac.
Well, originally, but all the new stuff, it's about Chevy or General Motors generically.
Well, because it's all the same company. But
Ben, my point is Chevy is testing hybrid IndyCar power plants right now. So
yes.
Sure, it might be badged as Cadillac, but right now Chevy is building the motors that would more than likely be the base or the baseline for the Formula One motor. So I'm going to call it a Chevy. Anyway, I wonder
if any of those would cross over. It's a good question.
I think Andretti's going to come into the sport right when Ford's like, we're going to partner with Red Bull. And Red Bull in another year or two, their domination's going to... And then all of a sudden Ford's going to be like, oh no, we timed it all wrong. And then, because it's going to be Ford UK, oh, Mike, Tuesday, isn't it? And then GM's going to be like, UK? Never heard of her. And it's going to be Andretti. Wipe the floor.
So yeah,
and
if any of that happens,
seat in 2025.
There we go. So that should be super interesting to watch, and we will keep you updated on that. In abundance of sports car news this week, Nick, do you want to run through some of that as you stuff your mouth with a Triscuit?
I would say, Ben, that was fantastic timing. I would love to.
I did that on purpose. I was going to do it, but go ahead.
So, starting off, we have Lilo Waidu and Robert Schwartzman, who will be testing the Ferrari 499P at the rookie test next month in Bahrain. Moving into GT3, ASP Akotis has announced a new partnership with Lexus for a two-car entry into the WEC's new LMGT3 class for 2024. It's going to run a few more seasons. The RCF is, and then we expect to see the GR GT3 car for the 2026 season. I swear to God, move.
Have you heard that? Have you heard that car?
Yes, it's sensational.
It sounds awesome.
British manufacturer Gibson will remain the sole engine supplier for LMP2 when the new chassis comes around in 2026. Moving on to some testing. Formula E star and DTM star Eduardo Mortara and the Nürburgring 24-hour winner Matteo Cairoli have both been testing for Lamborghini as Lambo tries to evaluate potential drivers for an additional car in the SC63. Again, Schwartzman and Wadu as well in the 499 again. Mick Schumacher's completed his first Alpine hypercar test amid all the rumors of the 2024 season. And then Thomas Preining from Manthey Racing will be testing the number 5 Penske Porsche 963 at the rookie test as well. He also this last weekend clinched the DTM championship for Manthey. And last but not least, Phil Hansen, who's been a United Autosports LMP2 driver, is joining JDC Miller Motorsports Racing next year in the Michelin Endurance Cup in the 963. If you're unaware what the Michelin Endurance Cup is, basically within the IMSA season, there are the 4 major endurance races, and so he will be racing those 4 major endurance races, and it's a separate championship.
Yes, for starters, congratulations to Manthey Racing, and thank you to Manthey Racing and all the people there with the video cameras that made one of the best celebration videos I've ever seen, which was so good.
Well, and then there was the FAF video about saying goodbye to Porsche that made me cry. Yeah,
that was pretty good too. That was well done.
A
lot of good news, and it's been a big sports car week despite not having much sports car racing. Nick, would you like to talk about NASCAR, MotoGP, I feel like we say Formula One because Formula One's the biggest topic this week.
I'll jump into NASCAR real quick.
By all means.
So, ladies and gentlemen, NASCAR was at Homestead, Miami this last weekend. I'm going to run through your results briefly. In last, Harrison Burton, 35th. Josh Bilicki, 34th. Kyle Larson is a funny reason why. I'll get to that in a minute. J.J. Yaley, 33rd. Joe Nemechek, 32nd. Or John Hunter Nemechek? Yeah, John Hunter. Ross Chastain, 31st. Denny Hamlin, 30th. And Martin Truex Jr., 29th. All of those were DNFs. So to the finishers, Brad Keselowski in 28th. Ricky Stenhouse in 27th. Ryan Newman in 26th. Todd Gilliland, 25th. Ty Dillon, 24th. Justin Haley, 23rd. Michael McDowell, 22nd. Christopher Buescher, 21st. Corey LaJoie, 20th. Alex Bowman, 19th. Kyle Busch, 18th. Chase Briscoe, 17th. 16th, Daniel Suarez. 15th, Chase Elliott. 14th, Eric Jones. 13th, Ryan Preece. 12th, Austin Cindric. 11th, Kevin Harvick. who was running a super cool throwback scheme commemorating his 2014 championship clinch at Homestead. Austin Dillon in 10th, Eric Almirola 9th, Joey Logano 8th, Ty Gibbs 7th, Bubba Wallace in the Grimace Shake Toyota livery, which is just jarring for so many
Not
different
about
reasons.
it. I saw it. It looks terrible.
AJ Allmendinger in 5th, William Byron in 4th, Tyler Reddick 3rd, Ryan Blaney 2nd, and Christopher Bell in 1st place. Let me run through what the playoff picture looks like because of all that before I get into some of the talking points from the race. So, we now have 2 of the final 4 locked in. Christopher Bell and Kyle Larson are locked in with their victories in the last 2 races. Currently above the cut line, we have William Byron and Ryan Blaney. Below the cut line, so Martinsville is October 30th, and basically, whoever is on points below this cut line gets eliminated. So we have Christopher Buescher, Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., and Tyler Reddick below the cut line. So if you are a fan of Christopher Bell or Kyle Larson, they are both guaranteed into the finals with a shot to win the championship. Now, let's talk about a few of the talking points. There's really only 2. The first one is people are now pissed that Homestead Miami is no longer the NASCAR championship finale because, first off, it used to be. Secondly, is one of the better races of the season. There were 4 grooves that people could run in consistently. There was a combination of high line, low line runs.
It's a cool track.
Combination of people doing high lines in 1-2, low line 3-4, a bunch of different stuff. And people are like, damn, we really missed this being the championship race because it was really wide open and it suited a lot of different driving styles. That was talking point number 1. Number 2, I don't really have an opinion. Number 2, Kyle Larson. Ben, did you see this on Instagram or Twitter?
No, I have unfollowed as much NASCAR stuff as I can. I avoid it like the plague.
Have you seen a Daytona 24-hour winner, a NASCAR Cup Series champion, late model champion, outlaw champion, plow into the sand barriers at the end of pit lane with no outside factors affecting it?
No, I cannot say I have.
Okay, so Ryan Blaney was coming to the pit lane, and he wasn't rushing up to the pit line, right? Slamming on brakes, downshifting, getting it right on the limiter. He was going in there. Kyle Larson decided with a 30-mile-an-hour closing rate to come up on the back of Ryan Blaney, and then in a last-minute attempt of, oh shit, maybe I should have been braking earlier, plows into the sand plastic barrel, and sand goes everywhere.
Perfect.
Literally DNF the car. And
perfect.
The amount of people I've seen on Twitter who are like, Kyle Larson is simultaneously the best driver in the sport, but then he also makes the stupidest...
He also does this stuff.
Yeah, it's like, you had this guy who beat Scott Pruitt and company at Daytona in the 24.
Right.
Beat some of NASCAR's best in the championship. And then it just
stuffs it into a barrier.
Just don't run up. Like, there is a car in front of you.
It's the one in the middle.
Yeah, there is a car in front of you. While you might want to get into pit lane later, there's a car there. You can't.
Can't change that. There's
Sorry.
a car.
So anyway, people are like, oh, it's Ryan Blaney's fault. He's going into pit lane too slow. It's like, guys, it's his prerogative. He can go as slow as he wants into pit lane.
He wants to crawl in there at 2 miles an hour. That's his thing.
If you're in traffic, and let's say you're merging onto the highway, you're accelerating up to speed, you're accelerating through 70, 80 miles an hour, and you plow into the rear of somebody doing 55 in the right lane, you can't be like, dude, they were going too slow. No, they were in front of you, and you plowed into the rear of them. Anyway. It doesn't make any sense, but hey, he's locked into the championship 4. So anyway, that's
good for him. I'm going to move on to two-wheeled motorsports. I'm going to talk about MotoGP.
For just one moment. I will be back momentarily. Continue.
Oh, by all means. I'm going to run through your qualifying for Phillip Island this past weekend. Your qualifying order, starting at the bottom, Taka Nakagami, who for some reason has a seat. Franco Morbidelli was P20, Miguel Oliveira in 19th, Luca Marini down in 18th, unfortunate for him. Fabio Quartararo, once again on that bad string of results for Yamaha in 17th. Joan Mir, 16th. Raul Fernandez, 15th. Augusto Fernandez, 14th. Alex Marquez, 13th. Enea Bastianini down in 12th, still recovering from his injuries earlier this season. Paul Espargaro was in 11th. Pretty good result from him. Marco Bezzecchi was in 10th. Maverick Vinales, 9th. Jack Miller down in 8th. Marc Marquez up in 7th. Fabio Gianantonio in 6th. Mind you, just lost his seat. Johan Zarco in 5th. Aleix Espargaro in 4th. Pecco Bagnaia, your championship leader, in 3rd. Brad Binder, the man on a mission, in 2nd. And Jorge Martin, your championship challenger, qualified P1. Now, something to note about this past weekend's Phillip Island, something happened that I didn't even know they were allowed to do. So, current MotoGP weekend schedule is qualifying on Friday, sprint race on Saturday, main race on Sunday. And unlike Formula One, there is not a separate qualifying for the sprint race. It's the same qualifying for both. So wherever you qualify on Friday is where you start Saturday and Sunday. Now, there was supposed to be horrible weather on Sunday, so they bumped the main race to Saturday. They moved the sprint race to Sunday. Main race was on Saturday. So we got an early race at Phillip Island, and your results are as follows. Down at the bottom, Joan Mir, 21st. Augusto Fernandez, 20th. Taka Nakagami, 19th, Paul Espargaro 18th, Franco Morbidelli in 17th, Raul Fernandez 16th, Marc Marquez down in 15th, not doing well, dropping down, what is that? We're looking at 8 spots. Down in 15th, Fabio Quartararo 14th, Miguel Oliveira 13th, Luca Marini made it up to 12th, Maverick Vinales in 11th, Enea Bastianini 10th, Alex Marquez 9th, Aleix Espargaro in 8th, Jack Miller made it up 1 spot into 7th, Marco Bezzecchi was finished 6th. Here's where it gets important. Jorge Martin, P5. Your pole sitter, championship challenger down in P5. Brad Binder dropped from 2nd to 4th. Fabio Di Giannantonio, 3rd place, maiden podium for Fabio Di Giannantonio. Congratulations to Fabio Di Giannantonio in his only 2nd season in MotoGP. Got a podium. Congratulations to him on the Gresini Ducati. Doesn't have a seat for next year, by the way. Doesn't have one. Being replaced by Marc Marquez. Doesn't have a seat. Honda, he's available.
Hard to argue with that one.
Fabio Di Giannantonio, been in the sport 2 years, has a podium. Taka Nakagami, this was his 99th race, never had a podium. So Fabio Di Giannantonio in 3rd. Pecco Bagnaia, your championship leader, in 2nd. And the man who has never won a race since he joined the sport in 2016 until this past weekend, Johan Zarco on the Prema Pramac Ducati in 1st position. Now, something to note about that Jorge Martin P5. Going on to the last lap, the start of the last lap, Jorge Martin was P1. He was P1. Now, here's the thing. Jorge Martin took a gamble and was the only rider to run a soft front tire.
But in 1 lap to go from P1 to P5 is a lot.
It worked for him for a very long time. He made a giant gap, and then every lap, after about half race distance, just started to get smaller and smaller and smaller. No. And then in 1 corner, he went from 1st to 5th. Basically went into a corner way too hot and didn't have the front grip, had to run wide, and lost 4 positions to Zarco, Pecco Bagnaia, Di Giannantonio, and Brad Binder.
When you were mentioning Taka Nakagami, he's basically Nico Hulkenberg.
Yeah, he's basically Nico Hulkenberg. So some stats on Johan Zarco. He now has, I actually find this quite funny, 1 win, 20 podiums, 120 races. So congratulations to Johan Zarco. First win since joining the Premier class in 2016. Like I said, Jorge Martin dropping from 1st to 5th on the last lap due to that soft tire gamble. Martin's tire misfortune extended Pecco Bagnaia's championship lead to 27 points. And then I just made a note about Taka Nakagami and the fact that for some reason he has a seat next year when Fabio Di Giannantonio doesn't. And I know that it's because Honda wants a Japanese rider on that specific bike, but like, the guy's been here for 99 races.
He's
and
had more than enough chance to prove himself.
Never podiumed.
Remember, for the people who may not watch MotoGP, there are less races on the calendar than in Formula One. So 99 races is
True.
more seasons than
The calendar didn't get big until like last year. So,
my damn dogs, brother. I do apologize. They be going in the kitchen, be pissing and shitting in the bathroom. I guess that is the place to do it. You know what I mean?
So yeah, I expect Taka Nakagami will be gone after next season because I imagine that Iger is going to move up from Moto 2. Speaking of Moto 2, I do have a bit of Moto 2 news, as it is quite interesting and we do need to cover it. So, however, despite the MotoGP race being moved from Sunday to Saturday, the Moto 3 and the Moto 2 races were not. They were both held on Sunday in the rain. Moto 3 race ran full distance. The Moto 2 race was cut to half distance, was cut short by 14 laps on Sunday due to poor weather. Half points were awarded. Championship leader Pedro Acosta crashed out on the siding lap of the race, got back up, started from the back of the grid. Note, this is a 28 bike grid, and recovered to 9th position during a wet half-distance race. Tony Arbolino, who is currently second in the championship, took a 15-second lead and won the race. Aaron Canet took second place.
That the guy put it down on a siding lap and then was able to just not put it down again.
Got it back up, started dead last, finished 9th, Pedro Acosta. And then Aaron Canet took second place. He's currently 4th in the championship, trying to catch one Jake Dixon. I'm going to run through your top 4 standings real quick, like I just mentioned. Pedro Acosta still leads with 280.5 points. And then, what is that? 56 points behind him is Tony Arbolino with 224.5 points. Jake Dixon with 172. And then Aaron Canet with 154. So I think Tony Arbolino is pretty safe in second, but Jake Dixon is definitely not safe in third from Aaron Canet. And there are only 4 more races on the MotoGP calendar, so this should be quite exciting. I'm a big Pedro Acosta fan. I have been since he joined Moto3 back in 20... No, when he joined in 20...
He was also a big Logan Sargeant fan back when Logan was go-karting.
No, I became a Logan Sargeant fan on Saturday. But that's super exciting, and I'm very interested to see how the Moto2 season finishes out, as Pedro Acosta is moving to MotoGP next year, whether he wins or not. However, he will probably win. He's got a substantial lead. Nick, would we like to talk about the United States Grand Prix?
Yeah, and I just got to say something before we jump into this full board.
Finish your Trisket. It's okay. Go ahead. Audience, please mind the Trisket break.
Brought to you by Trisket. Okay. How on God's green earth does Aston Martin keep bringing upgrades that make the car worse?
Oh, okay.
The whole point.
Nick, you're getting ahead of me. That's the second bullet point.
Listen. What does upgrade mean? It means making something better.
In theory.
How?
In theory.
Just refer back to our earlier episode where I ranted against the British. Somehow the British took a car that Fernando Alonso was putting on the podium and they made it so crap that it doesn't even finish. It just breaks.
Yeah, but the upgrades looked promising for Stroll.
Great. Lance Stroll, the driver that's going to lead us to the promised land.
Fernando Alonso didn't have the upgrades.
I know, because they were eliminated in Q1 for the first time this season. Not to mention the fact, not to mention the fact that before the car broke, he was still beating Lance Stroll. He's taking a car that's 6 or 8 months old and beating the newest upgraded one that's supposed to be the future of next year. Dude, I'm so happy.
It's all falling apart, Nick.
So happy I didn't spend the money to go this year. Not like we could have.
All falling apart. True.
But honestly, I never thought I'd say I want to see him back at McLaren.
Tell you what, though, for starters, the how's it pronounced? Kamoa, is that correct?
Kamoa.
Okay, so for starters, the Kamoa merch was strong. They had an abundance of Kamoa merch. Also, they had an abundance, and I mean in abundance, tenths of it, Daniel Ricciardo McLaren merch, which I found quite funny. I almost bought a hoodie just because I was there.
Was it discounted?
No. Same price as all the Norris. Very little Piastri merch, Lots of Norris merch, even more Ricardo merch. It's hilarious.
They're like, damn it, Bobby, you got the wrong goddamn Australian merch. It's Oscar Piastri now. None of that Danny Ricciardo bull crap.
Well, I wonder if what's happened is because he had a contract, they just went ahead and printed merch.
Not to mention,
way
he
ahead.
spelled his name wrong on the garage.
That was funny. Did you see the banner where they put up Pietro Fittipaldi instead of Stroll? They had a banner on one of the fences.
Felipe Drugovich.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude.
Felipe Drugovich got to be an F1 driver for a day.
Formula One, according to Coda, is Danny Rick still on McLaren, Lance Stroll not existing, and some guy named Daniel Ricciardo. Right.
Yeah. So, by the way, there are so many grandstands at Coda. There's so many seats at Coda now. It's dude, like general admission is tiny now.
No, but the ones at turn 19 they take down. Same with the ones at 10.
Okay. So there's way more over up the main straight from turn 12.
Right.
They extend like halfway up the straight.
Well, and there's the ones in turn 20.
There's the ones in turn 20. There were the ones in turn 19. There's turn 6 ones. I was at the turn 4 ones, which actually run from turn 3 to turn 5. There's stands at turn 2. And then there's the turn 1 and then all the normal ones that are there. But like we walked in and it's like there's stands everywhere.
Your spot that you were at for the sprint race is where when I bought this hat, I was standing when it was GA, and Lance Stroll took Fernando Alonso out, and he crashed directly in front of me, and I literally started crying. I was like, "You are shitting," because that was theoretically his last season too.
Those seats were so cool. I loved them so much. They're awesome.
The shot of the F1 cars going through the S's is not something that TV captures.
No, it's really not. And it's one of those things that you don't appreciate because of when we got there. We got there like 45 minutes before Sprint Shootout happened. Mm-hmm. So, by the way, I'm very upset. Dad, if you're listening to this, I'm upset because there was an F1 historic race that happened like an hour and a half before the sprint race.
Joking.
It was like 10:45 and we walked in at like 11:30.
You're joking.
Yeah, it was like, I don't think it was a race, but I think it was like an abundance of parade laps at speed.
Right.
And I'm like, I've never heard never heard a Formula One car that doesn't have a turbo V6 in it. I've never heard one. I have no idea what it sounds like. In person, never heard one. And there were an abundance of them there. And they raced like 20 minutes before I got there.
Ooh.
So, so the first things I saw go through the S's, because the only things I've seen go through those S's is your car and Formula One cars. So I'm like, well, no, duh, those look faster. It's a Formula One car. And then we watched the Super Cup race.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh, Formula One cars are real fast.
Well, but on the flip side, the Cup cars are really fast too. Like,
hold up. Are you basing that off the video that I posted?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Because by the way, if you look,
like Super Cups, all things considered, don't have that much aero.
They really don't.
It is just a 911 that's stripped out with a big motor.
True.
And so the speed that they carry through there, you kind of sit there and you're like.
Also, I like that they have different track limits than Formula One.
Right. Also, can we just talk, because I think this will have been the first time that you've seen current Super Cups in a field of 30 or 40 fly past you.
That depends. Super Cups, well, maybe, because there was Carrera Cup races happening at Le Mans. So I got to see that.
How was a fleet of 40 992s just?
Oh, dude, it was so cool because I saw him do like the warm-up lap or whatever. It's when we left and got beer and came back. And we're sitting there and like I saw like 15 or 20 of them go by. And my dad was like, oh, this is pretty cool or whatever. And I was like, no, it's like 40 cars. And he goes, what do you mean it's like 40 cars? And I was like, it's 40 cars. And you just hear, because it's really funny because you can't hear them at all until they start to head up to turn one.
And
then
you,
all of a sudden, it just sounds like the angriest swarm.
Yeah, when the flag drops, then you're like, oh,
it suddenly gets so loud. For starters, it was for sure louder than the F1 cars. For sure.
Oh, yeah.
And they come out of turn one, and the first time you see them come out of turn one, like, there's all the people sitting there that are clearly just Formula One fans, and are like, they're racing Beatles or something at 1:30. So
that
like, everyone's here.
That was just you.
It might have been just me. Well, I knew what it was, but like everyone in front of me was concerned, and they were like, "So these are like GT3 RSs," and I had to like explain it to people or whatever. But they come out of turn two, and it's like, oh, that's a lot of cost. That's double a Formula One field, and it's so cool. And then the best, for starters, some fantastic liveries in there. You saw the hippie livery. What's it called? What is the technical name for that livery?
The purple and green.
The purple and green livery that was on the 917.
It's literally the hippie livery, but it's just
okay?
Teeny sponsor, yeah.
I couldn't remember if it was the hippie livery or the psychedelic livery, but that livery. Okay, so the purple and green. Think of the purple and green. There will be a picture of a purple and green 917 here. There was a Super Cup
livery
in that livery, and it looked super cool because there were no other sponsors on the car. I was like, that's just a rich dude who's having a good time.
Mm-hmm.
He was consistently second to last of the whole race, but he was having a good time.
It's affectionately called the hippie. That's it.
Perfect. I'm glad I got that right. So Super Cup racing was honestly probably the most entertaining thing that I watched the whole time that I was there, which doesn't surprise me. And they sounded awesome. And yeah, they use different track limits. So there's a white line that runs right next to the track. And then there's the curbs. And then like 2.5 feet outside of that, there's another white line. That's the track limits for Super Cup races.
Yep.
So whereas like F1 cars are putting through a left-hander, putting their left side tires on the curbs, Super Cups through that same left-hander are putting their right side tires on the curbs.
Yeah.
And it's the coolest that you just see them like straight lined S's basically. And I'm like, those dudes are having a good time.
You're like real racing.
So finally some taste. So that was super fun to watch. I'm gonna run through your sprint shootout real quick. Logan Sargent P20, unfortunate. Yuki Tsunoda 19th, Bottas 18th, Magnussen 17th, Hulkenberg 16th, Zhou Guanyu in 15th, Stroll 14th, Ocon 13th, Alonso down in P12. Daniel Ricciardo, welcome back, P11, Pierre Gasly in 10th, Alex Albon in 9th, George Russell 8th, Sergio Perez making it to P7, Carlos Sainz in 6th, Oscar Piastri 5th, Lando Norris in 4th, Hamilton 3rd, Leclerc 2nd, and Verstappen first for the sprint shootout. And your sprint results: Lance Stroll at the bottom, Logan Sargent 19th, Kevin Magnussen 18th, Zhou Guanyu 17th, Valtteri Bottas 16th, Nico Hulkenberg 15th, Yuki Tsunoda in 14th, Fernando Alonso dropping one position to P13, Daniel Ricciardo dropping another to P12, Esteban Ocon in 11th, Piastri 10th, Albon staying in 9th, Russell in 8th, Gasly 7th, Sainz 6th, Perez 5th, Norris stayed in 4th, Leclerc dropped to 3rd, Hamilton bumped up to 2nd, and Max Verstappen ran away with it in P1. Okay, Nick Patty, did you see the statistic where everyone was very concerned that Logan Sargent was going to lose his seat almost certainly after the sprint race? They were certain that James Vowles was actively ripping up the contract because Max Verstappen finished P1, Alex Albon, who races for Williams, finished P9, and then Logan Sargent, who also races for Williams, finished P19. And Alex Albon in 9th was closer to Max Verstappen in 1st than Logan Sargent was to Alex Albon. Everyone was very concerned about Logan Sargent and his status as a Formula One driver. We were all very concerned. We were like, oh god.
Logan Sargent, just because he scored a point does not mean he's safe.
Oh, dude, they made an Instagram post about it. He's for sure safe. It is not confirmed that he's safe, but we were concerned that he was definitely leaving. Now it's he might leave thing.
Now it's he's probably leaving.
So moving on to qualifying, Logan Sargent, P20, Lance Stroll in 19th, Alex Albon in 18th, Fernando Alonso, P17, Nico Hulkenberg in 16th, Daniel Ricciardo in 15th. Not a great result. Welcome back, Danny Rick. Kevin Magnussen in 14th, Valtteri Bottas in 13th, Zhou Guanyu 12th, Yuki Tsunoda 11th, Oscar Piastri in 10th, Sergio Perez was down in 9th, Esteban Ocon in 8th, Gasly in 7th, Verstappen in 6th due to a lap time deleted. They did amend the track limits after qualifying, which does happen on Friday, by the way, may I remind you. George Russell qualified P5 for the main race. Carlos Sainz was 4th. Hamilton 3rd. Lando Norris once again in 2nd. And Charles Leclerc took pole position for the main race. Your main race results: DNFs, Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton, Esteban Ocon, Oscar Piastri, and Fernando Alonso. We will get to 2 of those in a moment. Daniel Ricciardo having, frankly, a horrible race back, finishing 15th. Go ahead. No, please.
No.
Daniel Ricciardo finishing 15th, Kevin Magnussen 14th, Zhou Guanyu in 13th, Valtteri Bottas in 12th, Nico Hülkenberg in 11th, Logan Sargent, P10. Are we having a moment over there, Nick? Are you okay?
Dude, what you can't see is I don't know if for the listeners or the viewers that have seen camera shake, Watson has moved the table another 6 inches, and I'm like pulling it back towards me because wherever I put my hands, he tries to go because the Triscuit dust. Anyway,
sure.
Logan
Sargent,
no fault of his own, somehow.
P10, Alex Albon in 9th, Yuki Tsunoda in 8th, Lance Stroll 7th, Pierre Gasly 6th, George Russell 5th, Sergio Perez up in 4th, Carlos Sainz 3rd, Lando Norris 2nd, once again missing out on that maiden victory, and Max Verstappen once again on the top step of the podium. Some things I'd like to...
Sorry.
Yes, that's right. For his 50th... No, I forgot about that. For his 50th race win, that puts him in a pretty special little club with Lewis Hamilton, Schumacher, Prost...
And Vettel?
Vettel, that's right. I always forget about that guy. There's like a weird blurry area from like 2000 to 2000 and like 15 where I forget that Formula One existed.
Yeah. Fake fan.
No, I'm just not 90 like you. There's like when I started watching Formula One.
What you mean to me?
And then all the old Formula One races that I've gone back.
Here's a mean person on the internet.
Yes. So congrats to Max Verstappen on his 50th win. Lando Norris, I think, got about as much out of that McLaren as is physically possible.
I relish Lando Norris's frustration with not winning. Like, I put that on a hot dog, and then I add some more, and then I just plunge my hand into a tub of it.
Do you not like Lando Norris?
You know what
do you like anyone that isn't Fernando Alonso?
Okay, no, I do. Here's the thing. I absorb the frustrated energy from fans who are like, so-and-so's the next big thing. He's a bright young star. Like Charles Leclerc, starting on pole, did not start. Starting on pole, did not finish. Starting on pole, disqualified. Like, that stuff, chef's kiss. Because I'm like, look, all of you people who are like, this young kid who won this championship you've never heard of is going to be the next
Formula 2. They both won Formula 2.
Like, you're the European Karting Championship. Like, I've never watched that in my life. I couldn't care. I literally could not care. Because then you have people who have won F2 who turned into nothing. And then you have people like George Russell who I would say are delivering. But like Charles Leclerc, sure, he's had some race wins, but at the end of the day, guys, he's no better than Carlos Sainz. I hate to break it to you, he's not.
Okay, quick side note. Also, just because I want to interrupt your tangent.
Yeah, please.
How many race wins? Do you know how many race wins Charles Leclerc has? How many do you think he has?
He's 11, right?
5. Right?
Huh?
Isn't this dude like really hyped for having 5 race wins? Grant, he's been in the sport the same time as Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen. You're destined to not win a bunch of them.
I'll just say
5? I feel like it's been a lot more than 5.
I'll just say this. Fernando Alonso, Michael Schumacher, Sebastian Vettel, Kimi Räikkönen, none of them got a contract as long as Charles Leclerc at Ferrari.
True.
What about him warrants the longest contract in Ferrari history.
Gets a lot of pole position.
Nah. Niki Lauda. Nah. Chuck Leclerc.
Which a commentator did say, by the way. I was there, and he said Charles Leclerc, or Chuck Leclerc, as he's often referred to here, and I was like, don't you say that? We don't say that. No one says that. That was one guy, one time.
I think what makes me happy about it is all of the Drive to Survive white women that are like, oh my God, Charles is wearing this bracelet that says something that means something. And
by the way, on campus today, UTSA, so many girls were at Charles Leclerc merch, and I was like, dude, you were this weekend.
I love that the girls that are like, oh my God, I just love Chucky. And then it's like, oh my God, he's on pole, Ferrari's going to do it. And because they're naive and because they don't watch Formula One, they think somehow Ferrari's got a chance. And then when Ferrari does win, it's smooth operator. And I love that. I've actually been cheering for Carlos more than I thought I would this season because I'm like, listen, somebody's got to replace Fernando.
So, for starters, there was an abundance of Carlos Sainz fans, a bunch of Charles Leclerc fans, but that's going to be a given. Tons of Carlos Sainz merch I saw walking around. Bunch of Max merch, but I assume that most of those people became fans in the past 3 seasons. That's what I'm going with. But more than anything else, Sergio Perez was the #1 fan base there.
Is this your first F1 race with
I'll tell you
at Red Bull?
I'll tell you, no, he was there last year. But I was in general admission, and it was kind of weird because I think it was mostly Max fans there. People were cheering for Max. Every time Max came around, he was getting booed by the entire Turn 4 grandstand.
All I know is Checo has always had the largest contingent of fans because I literally told Shelby,
it's insane.
I was like, what I would do to be hearing a bunch of Mexican F1 fans chanting, Checo, 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 because that's
every time he came around the track, dude. Every time. It was everyone around me.
Checo, and that is the Coda US.
I mean, it was not only was it the people in Checo merch, it was the people in Lewis Hamilton merch were chanting Checo.
Yeah. I'm wearing Fernando merch, but I'm like, hell yeah, I'll join in. It's a party.
Dude, absolutely. It was honestly, I think that's why he hasn't lost his contract, because Red Bull's like, man, we're gonna lose like 2/3 of our merch sales if we get rid of this guy.
No, exactly. But anyway, back to the young people. Same thing with Lando Norris. Like, Lando, he's this blah blah blah. It's like, guys, you put him in the same car as Fernando. You put Charles in the same car as Fernando. And they're just not as good. And I know it's like, well, you're a Fernando fan. But the bigger point
is true
is that you have the older driver that everybody's like, oh, when is he going to retire? Oh, but he's old. Oh, let's only sign him to 1-year deals because we don't know.
But he doesn't age. He's still like 30 years old.
But my point is the reason he didn't stay at Alpine is because they weren't willing to give him more than a 1-year contract deal.
True.
So what I'm saying is I
think Fernando was an anomaly in the Formula One timeline.
Sure, but I don't understand why you have my favorite interview of all time, Ted Kravitz to Christian Horner, Canada, 2011. Christian, who are you more worried about? Lewis Hamilton, Jenson Button, or the rain? And Christian Horner just goes, Fernando Alonso.
Like one of the greatest things I've ever seen. It makes for some great TikToks. I'll be honest.
Always been the guy that every team says we'd be lucky to have him. But then every time it comes down to, hey, let's sign a contract. Oh, well, we'll only do 1 year because, you're 37 and you're really old. And then it's like, we will sign our future away to Charles Leclerc. Where's the return? I just don't get it. It makes no sense. He's not. He is not going to win a championship at Ferrari. Mark my words. He's going to go.
No one's going to win a championip for Ferrari.
Who?
Ferrari is where people go to in their careers. That's where they go.
He started there. So
right. It's the problem. He started at the end.
Right. So he's done. He's nobody.
Yeah.
Lando.
Did you see that Max wants to go to Ferrari?
Yes. Which Max will join Ferrari when he has 275 wins and 15 championships.
Yeah.
He's like Thanos, but he's got 2 gloves.
He'll join Ferrari when Charles's contract is up in 2026. He'll go and replace
Ferrari when Charles is the team principal because he's already gone through and out of F1.
Exactly.
No, the only driver out of that class that I think has 2, George Russell and Alex Albon. And I think I'll give the nudge.
Albon is an underrated driver at the moment.
But here's the thing. I hate Mercedes, and I really dislike George Russell. But, God, man, he's so good.
The dude's got... it's so weird, though, okay? Because we're hyping up freaking George Russell. He's like 8th in the championship this year.
Well, right. But, again, Mercedes has had a worse car than Ferrari has all year up until questionably this weekend.
Let me see here. Let me pull up our Formula One little...
Please don't.
Thing we got going on here.
Well, while you do that, because we have 10 minutes left, how about I run through the qualifying order?
I already went through the qualifying order. I already went through the qualifying...
shootout and sprint, but you didn't
I did sprint, shootout, sprint, qualifying, and the race. I did all of it.
Oh.
I'm on top of it, Mr. Patty.
Sorry, ladies. I was too concerned with my dog tearing up my room.
You were. Let's see. Where is George Russell at the moment? George Russell is...
Which also, with Aston Martin not doing as well, I wonder how our whole prediction thing looks.
George Russell is 8th in the championship right now.
Behind Lewis, Max, Checo, Fernando.
Max, Sergio, Lewis, Fernando, Carlos, Lando, Charles.
Yeah, but he's only behind Charles by what? A couple points?
Yeah, I think so. But dude, if George Russell gets passed by Oscar Piastri in the championship...
I'll just say this. Carlos's drive at Monza, regardless of how the rest of his stint at Ferrari goes, I think was more than enough to prove to me that he is the better driver than Charles, because you have a track that Charles has won at. Charles is the number one driver for the home team who gets the preferential treatment, the preferential strategy. And Carlos fought off Charles on worse, worn tires, and Charles just could not find a way by him with DRS. On a track that DRS is arguably the most powerful.
But Charles has never had good race pace.
That's not true. Before the people jump on me and go, well, actually, because Monza's low downforce setups, the efficacy of DRS is actually less. I take it back. Just shut up. Stop. Leave me alone. All right? F1 fans, am I right? I will say this.
That'd be us.
I was rewatching the 2011 Rolex 24 at Daytona.
As you do.
So much better racing than F1. Like,
dude, everything is, dude. Everything's better racing than F1.
So I put on my Twitter at NicholasPatty21 if you want to check it out and vote. I genuinely think Daytona prototype racing from the mid-2000s is better than any sports car racing we have today. And I know people are going to be like, are you joking? Something about the Pontiac, what is it, GXS 09 or whatever, that Pratt and Miller built that was run by Stevenson with,
Nick,
with a Brumos Porsche powered like stock car prototype. Like, it just, God, so good. We are so... Like, look up, for those listening, look up 2011 Grand Am Series cars and just mosey through images of that and tell me.
This is one of those things where everyone throughout all of time has always said, man, racing like 10, 15 years ago was always better. Man, racing in the 60s was better.
Tell me, and you know what? Wrong, though.
Nick, but here's the thing, though, is 15 years ago, people were saying, man, the best racing was like 15 years ago. And then 30 years ago, they were saying the best racing was 15 years ago.
And they may be saying that, but here's why they're wrong, Ben. What about the late 1990s, other than F1, than F1 and IndyCar,
and sports car racing? All of it, Nick. It's all, if you...
No, Nick, I will say this. Hold on. I will say this. The 1990s was the worst decade for sports car racing if you take GTP out of it. I think Trans Am wasn't that great.
Take the Pete class out of it. If you get rid of the McLaren F1 and the Porsche GT2, if you get rid of all of the really good iconic cars that are worth more money than anything else, if you just get rid of all of the good racing, it was terrible.
We're gonna back this up real quick. All right, here's Nick's case as to why mid-2000s Grand Am is the pinnacle of motorsports in the 21st century. Okay,
plead your case.
And Bob Barsha, I'm gonna tag you on Twitter. I want to hear this. Okay, so you have arguably the best body style of GT3 Porsche ever, the 997, as the Porsche race car in America.
Beg to differ, but move on.
I said arguably.
Okay, so fair enough. So, I'll retract my statement. No, please
Yeah.
continue.
You have
All right.
rotary Mazda RX-8 in GT.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Love me some
I
Doritos.
genuinely don't know Mazdas, but I would contend that's the last time there was a rotary motor in professional sports car racing.
In any car ever, actually.
Oh, well, there you go.
That was it. That was the end.
You had that. You had the 5th gen Camaro built by Pratt & Miller, which was
Quite possibly the most trash car ever built. Anyway, moving on.
Says the guy in a 4th gen. You have E92 V8 M3s.
Good stuff. Real good stuff.
Come on.
M3 GT2 car, chef's kiss.
Yeah, but that's not what ran at Grand Am, but we'll overlook it. I will, for the sake
No, we're just talking about race cars of this era.
Okay, well, I was talking Grand Am, but that's fine. You have the C6 Corvette.
True.
I have a soft spot for the C5. Other than that, the pinnacle of Corvette racing, potentially of all time.
I didn't realize you were a C5 guy.
Just really C5s.
I like you a bit better now, Nick. You're okay. You're an alright guy.
Oh, well.
No matter what Shelby says,
You
you're okay.
also have, not to mention the fact that you have a C6 Corvette driven by Boris Said. Come on. Boris Said alone is proves my argument. On top of that, so there's one photo. You have 2 RX-8s coming down the front straight with a
look at these RX-8 Grand Am cars.
Jägermeister liveried 5th gen and a Canadian flag 997. What? So literally look up 2011 Grand Am Series cars and scroll through it with me. You have a Flying Lizard prototype Porsche. I'm sorry.
That thing's cool looking.
Which one?
The prototype, the Flying Lizard prototype Porsche.
Yeah. You got the Whelen C6. You got Turner Motorsports in their peak. You got SunTrust. You got Alex Gurney in the Gainesville Red Dragon. You have Scott Pruitt at his peak. You got Chevy, BMW, Porsche, Ford building these sick V8s that sound awesome. Small displacement, high revving. You have the first gen. You have the first gen Audi R8.
True.
You have, not to mention, you have in 2012 the Viper that returned. Come on.
It's the Viper.
You have,
you
have
you're
the
right.
458 with the screaming V8 that it had naturally aspirated before they went to turbos.
True.
So Grand Am was the place that you had LSs, rotaries, Metzgers, naturally aspirated Ferrari V8s, V10s from the Audi, or from the Audi and from the Viper. What?
Okay, Nick, you're right. So, and it pains me to say that. I'm not going to sleep tonight, but I was listening to another podcast, which don't exist, by the way. This is the only podcast. But supposedly, I was listening to another one, and they mentioned that 997 GT3 was the end of the proper analog car.
Yes.
That was peak analog car, and we've just slowly, not been going downhill fast, but slowly tapering off. Because we still have things like GT3s and Mustangs and all that stuff. But 997 GT3 is where it peaked. And I think you're right.
You also have, there was the Brumos one, which
Sure.
You also have, in Continental Tire, the S197 Boss 302. You have the Z28 Camaro. You also have, as my browser is slowing down because it's a piece of crap, this is the last generation of Pontiac race cars before Pontiac went defunct. I'm just saying, for people that didn't grow up with it, I know they're going to look at the Daytona prototypes and be like, that is a hideous car. I think there is something so charming about which, don't get me wrong, the US and in Europe running the same kind of homologation of cars, yeah, it's great for a host of reasons. But you don't get the unique cars that Grand Am and then ALMS, obviously. Oh, God, I'm looking at some of these cars, dude.
Nick, before we go way too far off the deep end, can I bring it back to 2 more points in Formula One?
I don't know how, but yes.
Real quick, we need to talk about Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton.
Okay.
Not actually not necessarily those two in the disqualification, because if you didn't hear, for some reason, if you don't follow Formula One, Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc were disqualified after the United States Grand Prix for a technical regulation infringement that involves the wooden plank on the bottom of Formula One cars. Yes, the most technological advanced race cars on the planet use a plank of wood to make sure they're not breaking the rules. And basically how it works is if your car is too low or you're making too much downforce, the plank will scrape across the bottom or will scrape across the ground and it wears down too much. And they measure how thick the wood is at the end of every race.
It's not wood.
And it's okay. It used to be wood. I still refer to it as a wood plank.
I forget what it's called, but it starts with a J.
Right. But there's a plank on the bottom that looks like wood, and basically they check to see how much it's worn down, and if it's worn down too much, you're disqualified. That's how it's always been. That's how it always should be, in all fairness. However, one thing that should change is they, quote, randomly select whose car they check. And the only cars that were checked were Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, and Lewis Hamilton. Now, I don't like that, because you're only checking 4 cars out of a 20-card field. Now, how do we not know that you just happened to pick this weekend the 4 cars that didn't break the rules, and the rest of them did? Now, I'm not saying you should check everyone, but I feel like what you should check is all the cars that finished in the points. That seems fair. Because if you didn't finish in the points, it doesn't matter if you get disqualified or not. You don't get any points. But I feel like if you finished in the points, they should check your car. Because, frankly, we don't know. And here's the thing. After they announced this, I actually went back and looked at some of my footage from the sprint race, and I could see this. You could see that Lewis Hamilton's car and Charles Leclerc's car going through the S's were sparking, and the Red Bulls weren't. And you can see it in pictures. They're just visibly lower than the Red Bulls.
Pre-race with spring rates and ride height? Because obviously ride height is one thing, right? Granted. And I know spring rates, they don't actually have springs. But ride height's one thing. And so theoretically, they'd all have to meet the minimum requirement ride height, or the max, whatever you want to, whichever one they set, minimum, before the race. However, you could still scrub too much off in terms of the plank if the rebound rate of whatever in the suspension controls that.
Right.
To where if it's soft and it sucks it to the ground, because if they measure it when it's stationary, you're not having the
effective downforce.
The ground effects, sucking it to the road. So it's not an accurate representation. However, if they were to do it where they also measure the compression rates of the suspension or whatever, I think that would be the way to do it, because you're not delaying race results. And they could always say, hey, listen, our system prior to the race is not 100% perfect. But if there's any blatant offenders, and by blatant, I mean we're talking fractions of a millimeter in F1 terms, we'll catch them. And then that way, it could be hey, mandatory start from the pit lane. Or, hey, depending on when they do it the morning of, you have to change the floor to a same specification floor, or you have to change the suspension settings. And what they could always do is after the race, test that car that already was found in violation of the rules, just to make sure that they actually didn't go back and undo the changes. I think there's several more effective.
There's several things that they could do to change it, but regardless, the system should be changed. I don't think it works. I think it's unfair to those specific 4 drivers. And I find it very weird that two of the 50% of the cars they tested got disqualified, and then they didn't even check their teammates' cars, one of whom got a podium because of this. They did not go back and check Sainz's car, which I find crazy. So hopefully they change that in the future. I imagine they will. Logan Sargeant, we do need to talk about it. Okay. Logan Sargeant got a point. Yes, he got a point because of 2 disqualifications, but he was there.
We'll take it.
He got a point. And this is a big deal.
I listened to Fortunate Son, and I revved it to Redline in the LS.
I've been listening to Creed all day to celebrate, but,
I think you might be more American, I ain't gonna lie.
So, they put out a new album, so I have to listen
to it.
They did? It's not a new album, but I think it's like a remastered best of. It's their 7 best songs, is what it is.
Ladies and gentlemen, this went from the clutch dump to the Creed dump. Now all we're going to talk about is Creed. Can you take me higher?
Higher was one of the songs. Do you want to guess what the songs are?
I'm looking.
No! All right.
So you know what's funny is it's basically my entire light.
It's exactly what it is for me.
Wide open, one over.
Because I saw this and I was like, oh, this just saves me from having to go through a playlist. I just put this on.
Yep.
But Logan Sargent got a point, which, if you're un-American, doesn't seem like a big deal. And despite the memes, it is a big deal because it's been 30 years since this happened. So, Nick, you wouldn't have seen my Instagram post because you're not on Instagram. But there is an Instagram post on the Clutch Dump, which is fantastic. I put a bunch of time into it and did a bunch of research on it. So the last time this happened was Michael Andretti at the Italian Grand Prix at Monza in 1993.
Yep.
Where he finished third and got 4 points in the number 7 McLaren. And the person who won that race was Damon Hill in a Williams. And then the person who would win the championship that year was one Alan Prost in the number 2 Williams. So, it's pretty cool. I find it interesting. This has never happened in our lifetime. And if I gotta wait another 30 years, I'll be 56 years old. I'll be dead by the time this happens again.
That's weird.
Dude.
Ben making it to 56 is weird.
It's definitely not gonna happen. Like, 40 seems like a long time, I'll be honest. But, yeah, this hasn't happened in our lifetime before. We have never witnessed this. An American getting Formula 1 points. This is a big deal.
Yeah, well, I was talking to my wife, my lovely wife Shelby, about how the man with the name of all names, Scott Speed, was not enough. It took Logan Sargent. And then she reminded me,
we need to find a more American name than the last name of Speed. We needed Sargent. We needed more American.
That's what Shelby was saying. She's like, why are all the Americans? You have Stingray Robb, Scott Speed, Logan Sargent, and it's like,
yeah.
What?
We don't actually. There's actually better. There's actually better drivers, but they have worse names, so we don't pick them. We just shun them, and we're like, no, you don't sound cool. You won't be cool enough for the memes, bro.
Yeah, we need
Logan Sargent.
Is going to be Brian Raptor, and it's going to just be an F-22 Raptor.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's going to be. But Nick, do you have any more final comments or things to talk about for episode 84?
No.
Well, that's going to do it, ladies and gentlemen, for this episode of The Clutch Dump. Like Nick said at the top of the show, make sure you go follow us on the YouTubes. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share the video. Let us know what you thought about the Formula 1 Grand Prix, what you thought about the madness of MotoGP at COTA, what you think about the NASCAR series heading into the playoffs, all of that, and all the news we talked about. Any news that we missed, comment down below. Like Nick said as well, make sure you go follow us on Instagram at The Clutch Dump. Go follow Nick on Twitter if you want some by-the-minute update motorsport and stuff. And arguments. If you like Nick's rants, go follow him. Whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on, make sure you follow or subscribe, whichever you can do. Leave a rating and a review. It helps us grow and find a bigger audience. But that's going to do it from us here. We will see you again Friday for episode 84.